Everybody come see us on tour. We'll be in Columbus, Dayton, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Lexington, Kentucky, Burbank, California, and Honolulu. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.
Welcome to Jimmy Dore Show, everybody. Keaton Weiss here with Russell Dobular filling in for Jimmy this week while he is on tour. Go to jimmydore.com for tickets to catch him in a town near you. We're talking a lot today about Bernie Sanders, Joe Rogan, Donald Trump, same names coming up in a lot of these stories. Well, the news is the news, folks. We don't control it. We just
we don't make the news.
That's right. That's right. We just report it. We don't make it. The gas stove, Dana Bash, asked Bernie Sanders about the vilification of attending Joe Rogan by the Democrats. So one of the narratives after this election is that Donald Trump's pitch to the manosphere, going on the Joe Rogan podcast and the Theo Von podcast, the real pitch to alternative media, is one of the things that really padded his landslide victory. Now, Bernie Sanders tried going on the Joe Rogan podcast back when he ran for president. He went on for about an hour, didn't go 3 hours the way Trump did. But he got a lot of pushback from party leaders, including surrogates like AOC, who were reportedly not happy with his decision to go on the show. And so now there's a bit of second guessing. Hey, should we have been so hard on Bernie for going on Joe Rogan now that this seemed to work pretty well for Donald Trump? So here's this interaction here on CNN.
Example, perhaps, of this kind of dynamic that we're hearing about. Joe Rogan, very popular podcaster. He endorsed Donald Trump in the final days of the election. 4 years ago, you went on his podcast. You got a lot of blowback for doing that and for touting that he endorsed you. So is this the kind of example of Democrats perhaps shunning or vilifying people who don't totally agree with them?
Yeah, I think that's fair enough. Look, you can have an argument with Rogan, agree with him, disagree with him, but what's the problem going on in those shows? It's hard for me to understand that. So I think we've got to get, and clearly you have an alternative media out there, a lot of podcasts that have millions and millions of viewers. Get on the show. Disagree with you here. I agree with you there. I don't see a problem in doing that. And you're right. I got vilified by some of the Democratic establishment because I went on Rogan's show. Now a lot of other people are doing just that.
Not just by the Democratic establishment, by AOC. AOC was reportedly very unhappy with his decision to go on the show and the decision to tout the endorsement. That's what really got him in trouble. Is Joe Rogan came out and said he was going to vote for Bernie Sanders, and the campaign made a big thing of it, as they were right to have, and that got a lot of pushback. So now
AOC came into my office. I was very surprised to see her wearing a strap-on. I was even more surprised to see it was in the shape of Nancy Pelosi, and she pegged me over my desk. That's true. That's true. And,
made me apologize.
She said she would come back the next day and do it again if I didn't apologize.
So I had no choice. So here's Dana Bash talking about that interaction. I guess this was the next morning or something. She got a different wardrobe, so this was on a different block, but here she is.
I wanted to ask him about Joe Rogan is because in the days since the election, you've heard a lot of Democrats saying, we need to find our own Joe Rogan. And Joe Rogan was their Joe Rogan.
There you have it.
and so the
Joe Rogan was basically a Bernie supporter.
Right. He endorsed him. And so the question
It's funny.
It's too late.
It's funny. 5 years later, he endorses Donald Trump. That's so funny. It's so funny how now Hitler's going to be president again.
Now that Bernie has been completely neutered and has no political power and can't get 25 people to show up to his appearances.
And I wanted to sort of illuminate this, shine a light on this with my interview with Senator Sanders, was that to me is such a prime example of where Democrats have kind of lost those people. Now, the point I was making with him is that there are a lot of things that Joe Rogan says and believes that a lot of Democrats just totally shun. He's said not great things about some social issues that Democrats don't agree with.
Like he doesn't believe in intersex cage fighting, I guess. Is that what they're talking about?
I guess so. I guess so.
Yeah.
They're obsessed with that. And once again, I will say to our many anti-communist, anti-Marxist friends, while we have this freeze frame of Dana Bash, listen, part of the program is her working in the soybean fields. Okay, that's part of the program. You grab Dana Bash, you drag her out of her luxury high-rise, and you send her out into the fields.
He doesn't support vaccines. And so that is part of the reason why when Bernie Sanders went on the show.
He took a medicine that a doctor told him to take. That's another big no-no. He took a medicine. I won't say what it is. I don't know what the rules are over there. But he took a medicine that his doctor told him. No, but they got to clip it for YouTube. So they took a medicine that the doctor told him to take. That's a big no-no. That's a big no-no.
Flintstones vitamins.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Flintstones vitamins. That's right. And so that was the other sin.
Oh, he got vilified. But him getting vilified by a lot of people on the left is case in point of the intolerance among a lot of people in the Democratic Party who claim that their whole mission is to be tolerant.
Well, and isn't that kind of a central piece of the conversation Democrats are having now about why this happened?
It is. And that's precisely why. Now, Bernie.
This is blowing my mind.
Senator
I covered the man.
It's just amazing. I haven't actually seen it.
Everybody calls him Bernie, but I agree with you. We're sitting in Washington, so it should be Senator Sanders.
His whole thing is our policies are not geared toward the working people. We went back and forth on that because President Biden's policies were geared toward the working people in a lot of ways.
No, they weren't.
Unless you were a railroad working person.
They never were. This is what is revealed by this election is that 2020 was the fluke, not 2016. 2016 was actually the leading indicator. That was the canary in the coal mine. It was 2020 that was the fluke. No, Biden didn't run on working class issues. Biden ran on the guy who, if you voted for him, you might be able to go in the supermarket without a mask on your face anymore. Like, that was basically his pitch. Hey, this guy's an incompetent manager. You got a cloth on your face. If you want to take it off, you're going to have to take it off on our terms. I can get you to a place where you can take it off. You get the thing in the thing here. You get but one of these right here, and then you take the cloth off the face. That was it. I mean, that's basically how he drove up his votes. Like, there was no working class agenda under Joe Biden. And these people sit here and they talk about how Bernie was able to communicate to Joe Rogan and they had the Democrats on their side as if they played no part in sabotaging that movement, in destroying that movement, in making sure that could never get off the ground. Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. 5 years ago, they were exactly the people who gatekeeped.
Of course.
Bernie talking to Joe Rogan. Well, Joe Rogan has said a lot of things that have really upset a lot of communities that are core to the Democratic Party. That's the song they were singing then. Now, they always are willing to concede these points once they will have no political impact whatsoever.
Right.
That's when
it's too late to do anything about it. That's when that's when they started asking questions about the Iraq War. Once it was too late to do anything about it.
Right.
That's when they started beating up on Israel a little bit after Gaza was already flattened.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
No, it's just always when there's nothing that can be done. So this tweet went kind of viral. This is kind of what she's talking about here.
This fucking moron.
8.2 million views. People saying Harris should have done Joe Rogan are missing the point. That wouldn't have helped her. Liberals need to build their own Joe Rogan, somebody who can speak to the people he speaks to without being a guy who wants to kiss ass to billionaires like Elon Musk. So, friend of show, Jimmy Dore, tweets out, liberals have their own Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan, he's a classic liberal. The Democrats aren't. They are now neocon, warmongering fascists who are anti-worker and crush union strikes, fund genocides, tear gas college students, censors of free speech, and are anti-First Amendment authoritarians, anti-bodily autonomy, and anti-women. The Democrats have Jon Stewart, Bill Maher, Jimmy Kimmel, Stephen Colbert, Seth Meyers, The Daily Show, Howard Stern, The View, MSNBC, CNN, The Washington Post, New York Times, Pod Save America, etc., etc., etc. Of course, they won't get the message or do any introspection of what is wrong with them or why people making under $50,000 don't vote for them anymore. They think they just need a smooth talker who can dress up neoconservative policies and trick workers into voting against their own interests instead. These people are the most ridiculously out of touch elites I've seen in my lifetime. And, well, that's true. And even as Dana Bash says, hey, you know what? Maybe the party was too hard on Bernie for going on Joe Rogan. Again, just completely goes over their head that they were amongst the loudest people shouting him down for doing that.
Of course.
This is just a mess of their own making. And the question really does have to be asked, like, looking back, do they actually have regrets about treating the Bernie movement the way they did? Because that was really the off-ramp to this. And they would have gotten off pretty cheap. He wouldn't have been able to do the kind of transformational things that he wanted to do. They'd have been able to block most of that shit. You're talking about paid leave would have gotten through. Like it,
and
like,
then they would have kept all the people like us
now?
Inside the party.
Yeah. Well, I'm just saying, even from a macro
agitating
level.
From outside. But I'm saying, if they had just let him win, look, would we have all been so red-pilled by that election if they just let Bernie? No, we'd probably all still be Democrats. We'd all be like, one day, guys, one day. We'd all still be singing that song if they had just let Bernie win.
I mean, even if you're not coming at this from the perspective of, okay, we need to really invest in the Democratic Party long term, right? And I'm not saying that these media people aren't Democrats. A vast, vast, vast majority of them are. Even if you're just looking at this from a lesser of two evils perspective, even if you have, severe Trump derangement syndrome and you really do fear for the future of the Republic now over these next 4 years, you could have avoided all that pretty cheap. Right? I mean, you would have had to give up one or two social programs. You would have had to, enact one or two social programs that you probably don't want to, because it probably takes the boot a little too far off working people's necks for your liking. But but now, given where you are now, that's got to look like a pretty good bargain in retrospect, in hindsight.
Well, and there's what I'm saying. You wouldn't have had all these people leave the Democratic Party if you had just done that. Your whole political project would be intact now.
Of course. You would have had things basically the way they were, with one or two more social programs that you probably didn't want. But okay, would you rather that, or would you rather be staring down now Trump term 2?
Well,
a rebooted version.
And when you look at how they play these things, it always reminds me of when they talk about hunters or tribes that use every part of the animal. That's what the media is like. They use every part of the animal. First they suppress any kind of progressive movement, and they profit and benefit from that. And then when everything they've told people is proven to be wrong, then they use that to show themselves to be fair and impartial and objective by critiquing what is clearly their own side, critiquing the establishment when it doesn't matter at all. They are completely opportunistic and parasitic. They take advantage of every turn in the news cycle to spin the myth of their own validity as news gathering organizations rather than propagandists. That's the purpose of that segment, to show that no, we're not in anyone's pocket. Look, we support Bernie. Yeah, look at us pushing back on the Joe Rogan narrative now that it doesn't matter at all.
Well, this is the question, is do they revert back to old ways, or do they see something like...
They go back to old ways. We've seen this before. They always do this.
But now the question is, do they re-examine that bargain? Do they see this as the only way out? The only way to salvage any part of the system that they love so dearly? Because if you look back at the initial bargain, that's really what the Bernie thing was. And that's what we said it was. We basically were saying, look, this is basically the last chance to save this country the easy way.
Right.
If you don't do it the easy way,
Hail Mary.
It's going to be a lot harder down the road. And so now option A is off the table. Do they re-examine that as perhaps the only way forward? I mean, you do have people coming out now and saying, as they have said in the past, that's true. But they have not been staring down this in the past. They blamed the first Trump victory on Russia. They said Hillary won the popular vote. It was a fluke. It was 80,000 votes spread across 3 states, and, blah, blah, blah. He caught us by surprise, and the Russians helped and all this. This is different. This is, you lost in a landslide. He now has a mandate. You are now looking at a very, very strong possibility that this becomes a new cultural wave, that this becomes another Reagan era where you got Trump for 4 and J.D. Vance for 8, right? So at that point, when you don't think you can wiggle out of this by, you know, putting together enough votes in the Philadelphia suburbs or whatever the fuck your plan was this time, at that point, you do have to re-examine these questions. Yeah, exactly. At that point, you do have to re-examine these questions, I think.
Yes, but it's really existential for them because, as we were touching on a little bit with Lee, the whole thing is just a grift. It's just a grift. It's just a way to stuff money into the pockets of the elite classes, and they're no good kids who move into politics, and through the family contacts they have, they get their jobs in these lobbying firms and these consulting firms and these political offices. It's a big fucking business for them. There's no reason. It's like saying, well, you know, if you're an arms dealer and you can't sell any more arms, you're gonna start a NGO for peace. Why would you do that? You lost, right? At that point, you lost. What's their incentive to become something other than what they are when the whole thing is just a big grift? It would have to be taken down from the outside. They're not going to reform. They have no motivation to. As long as they can keep people like George Soros writing the big checks, they can keep losing. They can keep getting rich losing. Like, why reform?
Well, because you have to be able to win a certain percentage of the time in order to be bribable, right? I mean, people aren't going to bribe an
they'll have their
party.
Cities. They'll have their blue states. They'll just be
big money in these national campaigns. I don't think they're going to be a viable national party for much longer.
Well, maybe. Well, that could be. Yeah, they could collapse as a national party.
Yeah.
But will they reform? I mean, reforming, they might as well collapse because its purpose is not politics. Its purpose is enrichment of its members.
Oh, sure.
Everybody come see us on tour. We'll be in Columbus, Dayton, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Lexington, Kentucky, Burbank, California, and Honolulu. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.